Hello and welcome to Ungoverned, snackable stories from me, Joan Cergol, a former town councilwoman from Huntington, New York, and recovering politician. In my inaugural podcast, I talked to you about how my sometimes mystical mom urged me during high school to keep an open mind for what lay ahead in life. What I couldn't have imagined then was how she would continue to keep her thumb on me, and more specifically, her green thumb on me, even after she died. So, hold on to your hats, folks, if you are hard-pressed to believe that the deceased not only know what we're up to here on Earth, but can actually course correct from the great beyond. Then you need to think again. Because I've got proof it does happen, and I'm going to tell you all about it right here on my next episode of Ungoverned. This beautiful season of spring and renewal tend to highlight my lackluster skills in outdoor gardening. Try as I may, I will never rise to the level of master gardener like my mom. I admittedly garden begrudgingly with mediocre results. Digging and planting are no more than a summer must-do to add a splash of color here and there. Another task to complete, but not to enjoy. Oh yes, I know my shortcomings, and gardening is one of them. Mom knew that too. Everything she touched flourished. Mom took immense pride in resuscitating plants that had the misfortune of being cared for by people like me. Even known for rescuing plants from grocery stores, for which she'd bargain to take off their hands for pennies and then take great care and satisfaction in nursing them to unlikely glory. Not even Mom's breathtaking flower and vegetable gardens inspired her as much as the comeback of a dying plant. Put a pin in that because this idea is going to resonate shortly. Now, it'll be 20 years this June that Mom left to tend to the gardens on the other side, leaving me and my black thumb to soldier on without her. Not much has changed since the days she would wander through my house to do a routine inspection of my houseplants. I'd hear things like this from across the house. "Joe need too much water," or "this one needs pruning." Or, worst of all, was when I'd get the cocked head, dreaded, hands-on hips, Mom stare of despair. "Oh, Johnny, this one's dead." My stock defense response, "Sorry, Mom, I may have a black thumb, but do take note, I somehow managed to keep our daughters alive." Mom's frown would turn to a quick smile at my poor attempt at humor, but her eyes always told me she was almost heartbroken by my unapologetic disinterest in gardening. She so wanted me to share her passion for digging in the dirt and never stopped trying to direct and encourage me to join her in those pursuits. Of course she was good at it. Mom was the daughter of an urban forester and caretaker of all manner of wildlife. Clearly that DNA skipped a generation by the time I came along. Sadly, time was not on Mom's side in teaching me the ways of the green thumb. Just before she was able to get into her garden on a beautiful Sunday in June, Mom suffered a fatal heart attack at the age of 75. She was as efficient dying as she was living, leaving us within a half hour of her arrival to the emergency room. As I exited the hospital on that sorrowful Sunday, I found myself consumed with thoughts of Mom's houseplants and gardens that didn't yet know. I made a beeline to her now unoccupied house. Pulling into the driveway, I passed Mom's lavish flower gardens and then her tall potted tomato plants by the back door. Those tomatoes were so ridiculously large, I admired them and feared them at the same time. Mom followed the doctrine of Miracle Grow like a religion, faithfully marking her calendar when to bestow its favor upon her grateful congregation. Now inside the house, I took inventory of Mom's houseplants with a sense of dread. Ugh, it was so intimidating. There were so many plants, too many, and in almost every room. I could at least rely on Mother Nature to assist me in keeping Mom's outdoor gardens happy and hydrated. But those godforsaken houseplants, they were now at the mercy of my black thumb. Still, I was determined to prove I could do this. My first act was to gather up every potted plant in the house to consolidate them into one space. They needed each other, plus I had neither the time nor patience to wander through every room to make sure I didn't miss any needed tending or watering. So I moved every single pot into what my parents called the anteroom that always had a lot of sunlight. Afterwards, I sat on the floor to take in that mournful gathering of houseplants. I cried for them, and then I cried for me. I was so not prepared for Mom to leave us that day, and I certainly wasn't equipped to take on the care of her pampered plants. Following a week of bereavement, I returned to my office. As I was playing catch-up with the paperwork and phone calls, I noticed one of our staff members hovering at my office door. It was Mary, and it didn't take any special powers of perception on my part to note that she was behaving out of sorts. Something wrong, Mary? Do you need me for anything, I asked. Oh, no, Mary replied. I just wanted to tell you again how sorry I am about your mom. You know, I hate to raise such a sensitive subject so soon, though, she added. Of course not, Mary. I appreciate your acknowledgement, and I gestured her to come into my office and sit. But Mary didn't budge. She remained frozen at my door for a beat too long. Something was up. Mary, are you okay? I asked. Finally, she managed to work up the courage to tell me something she was clearly struggling with. Mary said, I don't know how to say this, but I need to, or I think I'm supposed to tell you something, but I don't want to upset you or for you to think I'm crazy, she said. Well, that certainly piqued my interest. By all means, Mary, I said, tell me what's on your mind. She leaned on the doorframe for support and began to speak. Well, I had a dream, Mary told me. And your mom, well, she was in it. I only met her once here in our office, but I vividly remember her face and her German accent. It was definitely her, she said. Okay, so my mom appeared in your dream? I pressed, unable to suppress my intrigue and admittedly a little resentment. I mean, Mom hadn't yet shown up in any of my dreams, and here she is making an appearance in Mary's? Well, yes, Mary continued. She knocked on my door, and when I answered it, I said, Oh, Mrs. DeVito, what can I do for you? And your mom said, I need you to relay a message to my daughter. Now, Mary was certainly accustomed to taking and relaying phone messages to all of us in the office, but passing on messages from the other side was definitely not in her job description. And, I said, the message is? Mary replied, she told me to tell you to water the African violet. She told you what? I said. Mary repeated herself. Your mom was pretty insistent that you water the African violet. So that's it? My mom comes to your door in a dream and asks you to tell me to water the African violet and nothing else? Yes, that was it. So there it is, Mary said, unburdening herself of this duty to return to her other tasks. With Mary out of sight, I muttered out loud, well, not that I need to justify myself, but if you were here, Mom, you'd see that my black thumb happens to be taking pretty decent care of your plants. All of them. That conversation reminded me to check in on Mom's orphan plants during my lunch break that day. Remarkably, they were all doing fine, and I made special note of the 2 African violets I had moved into the anteroom, and they were healthy as far as I could tell. I felt vindicated. Before closing the back door behind me, something told me, though, to go back into the house and look one more time. So I did. When I entered my late father's study, I noticed an accumulation of dust on the drapes and windowsill. I pulled back the heavy, dust-laden drape, which coughed up a swirling cloud of particles. At once settled, of all things, revealed a sad-looking and fully wilted African violet that had been hidden from view behind that drape. Holy Hannah! Mom had to have been going out of her mind over that African violet she knew I had passed over. I swept the plant up, but instead of placing it with the others in the anteroom, I decided it had to come back with me to the office as proof to poor rattled Mary that she had done good in getting that message to me. Plunked it down on her desk, rendering my still mortified messenger wordless. Clearly, I didn't need to tell her what I had found. Well, here's the African violet, and now it's all yours. And promptly marched back to my office thinking how I had to give it to Mom, allowing nothing to stand in the way of saving her dying plant, not even death. Feeling the weight of pressure to revive the nearly dead African violet, Mary smartly turned it over to our coworker Arlene, who happened to keep a collection of thriving African violets atop the filing cabinets in the town attorney's office. That was a good call. In addition to feeling out of her depth to perform miracles on dying plants, I'm pretty sure Mary wanted no part of my mom returning to her dreams with yet more messages from the grave. Well, in no time, Arlene had Mom's African violet as robust as the others under her expert care. And the story of how that plant found its way into Arlene's care definitely made for some interesting chat at the water cooler that summer. I eventually took a few of Mom's houseplants into my own home after hers was sold, and 20 years later, still look over my shoulder each time I tend to them. Because, as I've learned, you never know who's watching. If you listen to your music and podcasts on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, iHeartRadio, or Amazon Music, please follow my podcast, Ungoverned with Joan Cergol, on those platforms. Or you can listen at my website at www.joancergol.com, where you can sign up to receive notifications of new episodes, and if you like, leave a message for me. I'd love to hear from you. Thanks for listening, and see you next time.